Listeners, thank you for your attention. So it's my duty now to introduce our speaker for this evening, whom you've already heard today talking and providing us with a lot of very valuable insight and knowledge about the aged care sector. I'm of course talking about Francis Price, Brother Francis Price, who is the Director of Catholic Health, the Chairman of Southern Cross Care Australia, and the Chairman of Southern Cross Care in Queensland. So, no further ado, we'd like to welcome and give a round of applause to Francis Price.
Test. I'd like to start off by acknowledging the Tasmanian Aboriginal people, traditional owners and ongoing custodians of Lutruwita, Tasmania. I pay my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples and their elders past, present and emerging. Vince is giving me instructions. I'd just like to say that I'm giving this in terms of my own views, not as any specific role or position. So whatever I say, you can hold me responsible or not hold anyone else. I'd like to welcome Bishop Les, Father Patrick, Supreme Knight Vince, brothers and brothers partners. Vince gave me a lot of time to prepare this when he rang last Friday and said, "Will you talk to me, talk for me?" So thanks very much, that Vince. I was struck today when I was standing in church this morning and I looked around and I saw Vince and I realised why he's Supreme Knight. He's the guy who doesn't have grey hair. So that's obviously a criteria if you ever want to be Supreme Knight, which I'm sorry, everyone else in the room's got no chance.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Today when Bishop Les highlighted his litany of Knights movies, I'm a bit younger than you and I'm sorry, but I couldn't get Knights of the Round Table and We Dance Whenever We're Able out of my head when you sort of started referring to that, because I'm a big Monty Python fan. Knights ago. So the Knights of Southern Cross started about 100 years ago, and at that time Catholics represented 20% of the Australian population. From its beginning, the KSC has been an organisation of action, a link between the Catholic Church and the secular world. It's also been an organisation of men from a variety of backgrounds unified by their faith. We all have our strengths and weaknesses, so like the men who formed it, the KSC has its strengths and weaknesses. Through history, the members of the KSC have inhabited two worlds. One where they work in their individual parishes, potentially dioceses, and provide support and service. The other where they support the broader Catholic community in the secular world, be that in terms of the battle for discrimination against employment practices, education and fighting for funding for Catholic schools and the establishment of PNFs, capital support for church activities with the establishment of archdiocesan, diocesan development funds, and aged care through Southern Cross Care. It's a record that people can rightly be proud of. The question is, in 100 years' time, will the Knights be able to look back at that previous 100 years and say the same thing? Pope Francis recently published an addendum to the Laudate Si called Laudate Deum. It's 7 pages and worth reading without choosing to put words in my namesake's mouth. It's a Pope calling out people who question the destruction of the planet and our communities. He states, "It continues to be regrettable that global crises are being squandered when there could be occasions to bring about beneficial change. This happened in 2007 to 2008 financial crisis and the COVID-19 crisis. The actual strategies developed worldwide in the wake of these crises fostered greater individualism, less integration, and increased freedom for the truly powerful who always find a way to walk away unscathed. I recently witnessed what this perceived individualism is driven in our society. I went to the doctor and I had to wait outside because I've had a bit of a cold, and I was standing there and a mother pulled up with two daughters. One looked about 13, the other about 8. And the 8-year-old was lamenting the fact that she had to wear a school uniform. And she was saying, "Why do I have to wear a uniform, Mummy?" And her mother said, "Well, wearing a uniform, people can't identify whether you come from a rich family or a not rich family." And she stood there and stamped her feet and said, "You're stopping me from expressing my personality." Maybe my parenting style was different, because I probably would have said, "I'll show you what personality is." We've delivered a message for generations in the West that an individual has the right to choose with no responsibility for those around it, the community and the broader world we inhabit. It will take generations to change that message if we have the desire and the will. It's an ideology that's infecting and decimating aged care, where the government is proposing legislation to give all rights to an individual receiving care, no responsibilities to ensure their actions don't negatively impact on those around them. While I'm happy to discuss these, I think there's another time, another place. We're all product of nurture and nature, with our views formed by our genetic history and upbringing. With this in mind, it's worth me filling in a bit about my background so you understand where I come from. I'm a child who was born in country Queensland town, moved around. I'm part of a family that his father worked in moved around, and we went to a number of different locations. Others here probably have the same background. I went to 5 schools, and for those who are wondering, I didn't get expelled from any of them. I moved to Brisbane when I left school. I'm the first person in my family who went to university. In my career, I've moved from Brisbane to Townsville, to Brisbane to Perth, and back to Brisbane, taking my wife and 3 daughters with me along the way. Probably, like my parents before me, the one constant in my life when I moved was the Catholic Church, and the fact that it was a foundation that was all when everything else had changed. But upbringing shapes my perspective on the world, which is why I can exist in the city, in the corporate world. I'm also comfortable in the country and come from the country's rough edges, and particularly my perspective on the understanding of the realities of life. As individuals and organisations, we've got a responsibility to protect the goods that are entrusted to us. It's a classic responsibility identified by Matthew in the parable of the tenants. In my role as chair of Southern Cross Care, Queensland and Australia, I view this responsibility as not only protecting and growing the talents. Part of my responsibility is to act in accordance with our Catholic ethos that's identified in our Constitution. Euthanasia in Australia and around the world has become the ultimate representation of individualism. I have the right to choose the time and circumstances of my death is a cat's cry of those who believe it. On another sort of perspective, today driving back, I found it a bit bizarre when they said on the radio that the first person in Australia has been cryogenically frozen looking for a future world. Harking back to Monty Python and that scene where they were collecting bodies from the plague, and the guy says, "I'm not dead yet." The reality is, he is. The justification for being used to address societies, euthanasia is a justification being used to address society's problems. If you look at Canada, which is the most extreme, the issue is what makes people uncomfortable should be dealt with. Mental health, PTSD, disability, and even poverty. I was asked by Archbishop Mark Coleridge to look at how he could respond to euthanasia legislation in Queensland, in understanding how this legislation that enables state-sanctioned killing came to occur. It became apparent to me that the legislation was the result of research by two QUT academics. Over the last 5 years, they've collectively published about 70 publications, all advocating. Whenever there's a public inquiry, they're the experts who stand up. They're the experts whose legislation has been duplicated around the country. Same experts are now advocating for the euthanasia should be expanded to people with dementia and force Catholic hospitals to engage in abortion. The reality is that the Church's moral authority has minimal agency in secular society. The Catholic Church has withdrawn from active participation in politics in Australia. Like our predecessors, we are learning that we cannot influence political decisions. We will be discriminated against because of our beliefs. I make the same point that the same approach isn't necessarily taken by Pentecostal brethren. If I'm critical of the role we've taken as knights in this church, we've taken our eye off the ball in relation to broader issues that impact us in the secular world. In relation to abortion, euthanasia, nationalisation of assets, and the rights of schools to teach in accordance to our faith, we've been sidelined. Seeing the prosecution of our predecessors fought to overcome returning, not this time hidden, but displayed in a barrage of government action. As a teen, I played country football with much older men. You learnt that if you were passive, you got hurt. If the Catholic Church is to be valid in secular discussions, our presentation to government needs to be based on research. It's one of the great ironies that despite the global unity of the Church, we struggle to coordinate between parishes, between dioceses, between orders. And that lack of coordination struggles in terms of focusing our resources. The structure that unifies also separates. We need to focus on committing the resources to truly understand the research issues and present a unified front to government and the community. But representation to government and community isn't enough. We need to change the narrative and recapture the language. When did abortion become choice? When did euthanasia become voluntary assisted dying? Because we'd let it. We allowed the language to be sanitised, and we imagined those battles in the past until it was too late. We now need to push back against secularism that seeks to invade our spaces and our beliefs, the ideology of individualism, but not get caught up in diversionary cultural wars. Because if there's a conflict and we seek to discriminate against others, we have no credibility when it comes to be discriminated against. It's not about denying others their rights. It's about saying to others that we will not accept our rights to be denied, our beliefs disregarded. To be successful, it needs to be reinforced by active community campaigns. We need local people holding local politicians responsible for their votes and causing them to understand that the electoral consequences of driving discrimination based on faith. The ability to engage with the church community and the broader community is where the Knights have a unique position. But to fill this role, we need to recognise our weaknesses. We need to stop being some sort of secret society in our community churches. We need to recognise our falling membership is a result of our failure to broaden our membership. And if we don't, we will, like many of our brothers in multitudes of branches across the country, struggle to exist. We need to learn and engage in political discussion, not from a perspective of moral lecture, but from community benefit, human rights, and love. 100 years ago, when the Knights came into existence in Australia, 20% of the population were Catholic. In the last census, 20% of the population were Catholic. It's a baseline we started from before. While these numbers may not reflect in the pews of our churches, the fact that people choose to tick the box tells me something. We've got a solid base. It's a base. If we look around at churches, you'll realise that the demographics are on our side. And those attending aren't our children, but the new energetic collection of faces from Africa, Asia, the Pacific and South America. the church of the new world, not the old. These are people who embrace their faith, our faith, and have children, lots of them. But will these children be denied a Catholic education because we've allowed our schools to become captured by a secular world where education is an industry, the currency is privilege, not mission? They are the growing population of the Australian population if we choose to embrace them. What we need to do as Knights, from my perspective, is to reassess who we are as an organisation, to make sure that we can go out to those communities that we see within our church, give them a reason to be part of us, teach them how to engage as part of the Australian community, how to engage in terms of influencing discussion, and give them the opportunity to participate in the Catholic Church as we over time have had the opportunity to participate. It's a future that if we choose, we can make a difference. The question is, will we choose it?